Hi everyone, this is Omar from TravelSummary.com. Today I wanted to do something a little bit different because I know there's a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress out there with regards to the coronavirus, the COVID-19 virus that's going around. And especially for people that like to travel in the travel community, obviously there's a little bit of an increased chance of somebody like that getting it because, going through airports and airplanes are not exactly the most sanitary places in the world. And obviously with the amount of people that go through those spaces from all over the world, who knows what could be sitting on any of those surfaces. So I did want to give some tips and advice on a couple of different areas. The first is going to be with regards to actual travel plans that you have booked and possibilities of how you can get out of it or change them, things like that. I'm going to go over a few different tips that I have in that regard. The other area is going to actually be with regards to if you are going to travel anyway. If you have some circumstances that you either need or want to travel anyway, then some tips that you can take that will actually help you stay safe and stay in a sanitary condition. And these are going to be tips that are actually good for not just right now, but they're good hygiene to have just in general. And hopefully I'll give you a few tips that you may not have thought of, and maybe something will just click for you, will make sense, and will stay in your mind a little bit longer than otherwise it might. So stay tuned. I'm going to talk about some of these different tips in those two different areas. So hopefully you'll get some benefit out of it. The first topic that I want to cover is for people that already have flights booked and that are looking to get out of them or make some kind of a change to them. There are so many things that are changing on a daily basis with regards to how the virus is spreading throughout the world and how airlines are responding to that with regards to their policies. Just a few days ago, United announced a policy that made it extremely difficult for you to make any changes and get refunds. And a couple of days after that, just yesterday, they decided to completely walk that back and make it a lot easier. So right now, most domestic US airlines are making it so that you can make changes and cancellations and rebookings usually on a pretty flexible basis. Now, not all of them are allowing you to cancel and get a full refund without any fee. That is still a little bit rare, but most airlines are allowing you to make at least some kind of a change to delay your flights, that kind of thing to later in the year. Most airlines are also canceling a lot of flights right now, and they are reducing capacity because there's so little demand for people that want to book flights. It's worse than it was after 9/11. After 9/11, it only lasted for a few months before that demand started picking back up again. Right now, they're forecasting, airlines are at least, the United CEO just came out and said today that he expects demand to be decreased by up to 70% for the next 2 months, and for it to remain 70% and then go down to maybe 60 and then 40 and then 20% in the upcoming months to the end of the year. That is a huge decrease in demand, and airlines are just not going to be flying planes for that long. They're not going to be flying them empty if they don't have to. So at some point they're going to start cutting capacity. That means cutting flights as well. So what's in your best interest is to wait until the very last minute, the last day rather, before you make a change or cancellation on your flight. These policies have been getting easier and easier and more customer friendly as time has gone on, as this virus has gotten worse. So if you have a flight that's coming up at the end of April, for example, at the end of March, at the end of this month, then it would be in your best interest to wait to see how things are going to go. If the airline right now is not giving you a solution that you care for example, if they're not letting you make a change for your flight that's in June, wait it out a little bit, wait until June, and you may be able to back out of it at that point because the policy may change. So I'm not going to give specific advice per airline because it just doesn't make sense. Again, these policies are changing constantly on a daily basis. And same goes for hotels. Hyatt is recently announced that they're going to give you a refund for non-refundable fares. They're giving you some kind of points back at least. So all these things are constantly changing. It just doesn't make sense for me to give specific advice for airlines or specific hotels, but constantly check back and just be aware of what's going on with the country that you're planning on going to, what their status is with regards to any kind of quarantines, anything like that. Now, I also do want to say that award flights are treated a little bit differently than normal revenue flights for most of these airlines. I know Alaska Airlines and obviously Southwest, because their policies are always great, they are the ones that I know are providing the same type of waivers that are available for revenue flights on award flights. The other airlines, their policies are not so clear right now. A lot of them are still sticking to their original policies of if you wanted to cancel, you still have to pay a fee to get the miles redeposited into your account. So keep that in mind as well, that these policies are, a lot of them are friendly towards revenue flights and not so much towards award flights. But again, these things are constantly changing, and sometime it may work in your future at some time in the future. It may work to your benefit at some time in the future. So just keep checking with the airline, keep checking these travel advisories. You may get something that actually works out to your benefit. Another thing to keep in mind is credit card travel insurance. A lot of credit cards offer some kind of insurance if the airline either cancels or delays your flights. And this is a lot more prevalent on the more premium cards. So one of my previous videos, one of the more popular ones actually, is the Amex Platinum versus the Chase Sapphire Reserve, given the new changes for the Reserve this year. Both of those cards offer some form of travel insurance if there's a cancellation or a delay, but they're also extremely different with regards to how the flights have to be booked. Amex is a lot more difficult. You have to have round-trip flights booked. It had to have been booked in this year because their policy only kicked in this year. Chase Sapphire Reserve, if you booked even a portion of it with their credit card, it's valid. The insurance would be valid on that. Plus they have only a 6-hour delay requirement. So there's a lot of different things, and that's only 2 of the cards. If you booked on Citi cards, it would be different in Bank of America. If you booked on a co-branded card with Alaska at Bank of America, there's so many different possibilities. You have to dig into the actual details of the card that you booked with, how you booked, whether you put the entire fare on it, whether it was just a portion, if it's an award flight, whether you pay the taxes on it. There's so many different factors that you just have to keep them in mind. And it's always a good idea to check that though, because if there is a cancellation and your airline is not allowing you any kind of a waiver, you could get at least some portion of it reimbursed from your credit card. So that is another important thing to keep in mind. If you find yourself in a situation where you either have to travel or you really want to travel despite everything that's going on in the world right now, then I do want to give you some tips as well. The first tip is going to be, number one, I only recommend continuing to travel or going on a trip in the near future if you are an experienced traveler. And there are a number of reasons for that. I just mentioned that there's so much turmoil and everything going on with regards to airlines and cancellations and things like that. You have to be able to weather that kind of a difficulty. If there's a lot of cancellations, if your flight has changed timings and now you have a long layover or you have an overnight or something like that that you were not initially expecting, you have to be able to know how to work with the airline and be able to do that. And I'm not saying that you can't do it if you've never done it before, but it does take a little bit of patience. It does take a little bit of experience, I think, to be able to do it a lot more efficiently. You have to know who to call, who to talk to, who can actually help you out versus who can't. And I think these things are things that you pick up as you travel on a more regular basis. So if you are an experienced traveler, I think that would go a long way if you do have an upcoming trip. The next tip that I have is, unfortunately, something that's not going to sound really that great, but it is be ready for a quarantine and be able to weather a 14-day absence from your home. So if you plan on coming back, and again, your flight is canceled, or if you're in a country that all of a sudden decides, hey, I'm going to quarantine everybody, or if the US decides to quarantine everybody from that country, then usually that quarantine is going to last 10 to 14 days. And for most people, that is a really long time. Most of us have to go to work when we come back from a trip. And so if you can be out of work for 2 weeks and still be okay, or if you have the money, then no problem. But keep in mind that if you're being quarantined in a foreign country, you're probably going to have to pay for all of those expenses out of pocket. You're going to have to pay for a hotel or some other accommodations, all the food and everything else that goes with it. And there's not a lot that you can do about it. You also have to figure out flights. Again, just like I mentioned previously, if you have a quarantine and your flight is expected to go on a certain date and all of a sudden now you have to wait another 10 days or 14 days, you have to be able to either work with the airline or work with your credit card, things like that. So it's not that easy, but it is something that you have to keep in the back of your mind. You have to be ready for all kind of contingencies and have backup plans in place so that you are able to weather that kind of storm. So again, it's not going to be easy. It's not something that you want to have in the back of your head when you're traveling. Definitely, it'll make it a lot more difficult to enjoy your time at your destination. But I think it's prudent to keep these things in mind because you don't want to get stuck and find out that you're going to come back home and you're no longer going to have a job, right? Don't put yourself in that kind of situation. That's all I'm saying. Just keep that in mind, and keep in mind that obviously having the money and resources available to you in whatever country you're traveling to will also go a long way in having accommodations and food available. The next few tips I'm going to give are going to seem kind of silly, at least to me as I'm saying them, because they're hygiene tips, right? I have a degree in economics. I am a finance guy, a real estate guy. I am doing obviously a lot of travel stuff, and I don't usually give advice on hygiene. It's usually a kind of a common sense thing, but I think right now times are a little bit different, right? You have to keep in mind the different places that you're going, and you always have to have in the back of your mind, I think, this pessimistic view that everything that you touch is going to be dirty. And I think that'll go a long way. So with regards to being in an airport, obviously any surface you touch, right, you're going to want to sanitize, you're going to want to wash your hands as soon as possible. But specifically with regards to getting on the airplane, if you're getting on an airplane, you're going to want to have at least a couple of things, and I think you probably should have these everywhere you go anyway, is sanitizing wipes and hand sanitizer. When you get on a plane, in any seat that you sit in, whether you're in economy, business, or first class, anywhere you go, you're going to want to wipe down with one of those wipes, an antibacterial sanitizing wipe, any surface that you might touch. The armrest, your seat belt buckle, the TV screen, the tray table, the window if you want to touch it. And even if you don't want to touch it, you might as well just wipe it down anyway, because who knows, you may accidentally touch it anyway. Wipe everything down in your immediate area so that you do not have to worry about it for the rest of your flight. It's just a good safety tip. Again, you don't know who sat in that seat before you. You don't know how well the airline has actually cleansed that seat. I would be very surprised if they were able to really wipe down and sanitize every seat on every plane after every flight. So again, I'm not saying they're doing a bad job. They're probably doing all they can, but again, they have limited resources as well. So it's in your best interest, again, to be a pessimist and to do all of this on your own. Also carry hand sanitizer with you, and every single time you either go to the lavatory, the restroom, and come back, keep in mind that you have to touch a door. Try to use a towel or whatever you wiped your hands with afterwards. Use that to open and close doors, but again, you're probably going to have to touch things on the way there. You're going to touch the overhead bin maybe. A lot of people touch seats as they're climbing back up to their own seat, right? So anything you touch, just keep in mind that you just remember that it's dirty, right? You have to assume that it's dirty. Again, be a pessimist. As soon as you get back to your seat, again, sanitize your hands. Just assume that you're going to be eating something again later on. Everyone touches their face. We all know that we touch our faces way more than we think. We don't even realize when we're doing it. So sanitize your hands all the time. Wash them all the time, especially when you touch something, right? Just the way that I look at it is, I think everybody at some point has worked in the garden, got their hands a little bit dirty with dirt, or worked on maybe some kind of machinery, a car, where their hands get greasy or oily. And at that point, they've had an itch on their face, right? And you can't touch your hands. Your hands are dirty. They're filthy right now. So you find some other way, right? You do it on your forearm or a piece of clothing or something like that. That's how I think everybody should be treating everything, especially when traveling. Just assume that your hands are always filthy, and that way you won't risk touching your face. And it's easier said than done, but I think it's a good tip, especially when you're on an airplane. With regards to actually being on the airplane, I know there's some people that have had concerns about the air filtration. Obviously there's a lot of recirculated air, but in general, those filters are actually really good. They're HEPA filters, and they filter out almost everything. 99.9% is what they say of all the particulates that are in the air, and that should be pretty good for you when you're on the plane in terms of what you breathe. It seems like also, and again, I'm not any kind of medical or disease doctor or anything like that, but they say that with regards to this new coronavirus, that it's mostly things that are on surfaces or transmitted through direct contact with the mucus or people that are sneezing and things like that, rather than through the air. And so I don't think that is something that you should be worried about. Airlines generally do a good job of replacing these filters anyway, because it impacts how efficient the flight flies. So I wouldn't be worried about the air. Definitely be more concerned about all the surfaces that are around you and all the things that you're touching. Hotels obviously present another problem. Hotels are generally seen to be as very dirty. And again, I know a lot of us don't think about this on a regular basis, but again, treat it the same way as I just explained as the airplane. The TV remote is generally known as one of the most filthy things in travel. And so you never want to touch that anyway. So I wouldn't even recommend actually wiping that down. I would recommend just not touching it. I know a lot of people, they bring Ziploc bags or something similar, or plastic wrap, and they use that. A good hack is if the hotel room, the bathroom has a shower cap, that's a good thing that you can use to wrap around the remote, because it's generally pretty thin and it's clear, so you can still see all the buttons. So that's one thing. But again, as soon as you get in the hotel room, take one of those wipes that you have and wipe down anything that you might touch. The light switches, the thermostat, window coverings, the bathroom sink, and anything that you might touch, the shower handles, anything that you can think of that you might touch, you want to wipe that down as soon as you get into the hotel room. But again, even after you touch things, if you touch the blinds, if you have to move the blinds up and down, that string is not easy to be sanitized with a wipe. If you touch that, make sure you wash your hands after that. If the light switch is next to you, or the pen, or any other kind of controls, I mean, there's just so many different things that you could touch in a hotel room. At least you do have access to a sink. It's easy to wash your hands. Just be cognizant of anything that you touch. Just again, assume that it's dirty and be ready to wash your hands. And I think actually one of the things that people don't necessarily think of all the time is the bed comforter. So the sheets and all that usually get washed. The pillows, those usually get washed, or at least the pillow covers, get washed after every resident of a hotel. So at least hopefully, right? Hopefully you're staying at a decent hotel where they actually wash the linens and all that. But the comforter, the cover, the duvet cover, that is usually something that is not washed on a regular basis, if at all. So if you can avoid that, if you want to just pull that off and just regulate the temperature with the thermostat, and with regards to the sheets, just using those to sleep, that would be the best bet, because again, they don't really wash those. You have no idea what the person that was in the room before you had, and if they sneezed or coughed on that duvet cover, you just don't want to take that risk. So again, try to avoid using that. Anything else in there also, just assume that it's just crawling in germs. Again, I hate to be a broken record, but in this kind of situation, it helps to be pessimistic. And if you're going to be traveling, I think it is worth it at this point to be that pessimistic, because you don't want to, again, be quarantined or get sick and be running a fever when you're going through the airport, and then all of a sudden, hey, you're stuck in a foreign country. So just be familiar with what the policies are. And again, I only recommend traveling at this point if you are an expert traveler, because you probably are going to encounter at some point some kind of disruption, and you don't want to do that. But again, I also understand that a lot of people, they have plans that are not easy to move. They're going to visit somebody that's getting married right now, or maybe you are getting married, or somebody's getting married and they're going on their honeymoon. They don't want to cancel that just because of a silly virus or something like that, or they have to visit a sick loved one. Look, I know there's a lot of reasons that people want to travel, for business reasons and otherwise, and I don't blame them at all, but I do want to make sure that everybody at least has an idea of things that they can do to stay safe. So hopefully everybody out there can use some of the advice that I gave today and stay safe. And I hope this virus goes away sooner rather than later, so that we can just go back to taking advantage of some travel deals. Hopefully there's going to be a lot of them out of all of this disruption of travel when capacity does start to come out again, but that'll be a video for a different day. Let's just everybody try to stay safe and enjoy your travels if you are going to be traveling, and hopefully you won't have as much stress if you are looking to cancel, because thankfully a lot of these airlines are starting to relax their policies. Just again, keep checking with the airline. Domestic airlines have usually been pretty good recently, but foreign airlines, if you're booked on Air Canada Aeroplan, or if you're booked using some other kind of Turkish Miles, something like that, you're going to want to contact those airlines, because they may not be as friendly as some of the domestic airlines are being. So until next time, guys, happy travels, stay safe out there, and hopefully everybody will remain completely safe and avoid this coronavirus. I'll see you guys next time.